Good evening, everybody. So, welcome again to yet another session of Read and Grow. And today's book, like we know, is Deep Work by Cal Newport. Now, this book talks about rules for focused success in a distracted world. Now, the reason I picked this book is because as a leadership coach, I thought I can share insights and help my clients to handle their challenges better, especially on time management. So what really stood out for me about this book is basically, we all know deep work is important, but it increases our awareness on the need for deep work to move away from shallow work and keep the distractions at bay. The essence of this book is that the author has shared the idea of deep work, and then he talks about 4 rules that govern deep rule. Now, after I read this book, I realized that few aspects of the book deeply resonates with me, and to be honest, a couple of them did not. Now, I shall take you through my perspective as we move on for this evening. So let's start off with the brass tacks. What is deep work? Professional activities that are done in a state of distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive abilities to its limit. Now, these efforts, they create value, they improve your skills, and are hard to replicate. He gives the example of Bill Gates, who conducts Think Weeks twice a year, where he would isolate himself and do. If you don't fall, you go back because the technology is advancing day after day. So if you create something useful that's essentially limitless, that's great. That's what deep work is all about. If not, it's mediocre and you could get into trouble. So produce the best stuff that you're actually capable of producing, because deep work is rare and valuable, and hence whoever cultivates the skill will thrive. So the first chapter the author talks about is deep work is valuable. He says there's a premium to being the best, and 3 groups of people who will have advantage in the new economy are those who can work well and creatively with intelligent machines, because we are in the technological age. The second kind are those who are best at whatever they do. And the third are those who have access to capital. So mastering these relevant skills alone is not sufficient. You must transform the latent potential into tangible results that people value. And the 2 abilities to thrive are the ability to quickly master things that are hard, and the ability to produce an elite level in terms of both quality as well as speed. And to develop these, you need to perform deep work, which requires intense concentration in whatever that you're doing. Deep work helps you to produce an elite level, and deep work helps you to quickly learn things that are hard. Now he gives a formula. So he says high quality work that's produced is nothing but time spent into the intensity of focus. So focus is the key of deep work. The type of work that optimizes your performance is deep work. And to produce your peak level, you need to work for extended periods with full concentration on a single task without distractions. He gives the instance of Jack Dorsey, who is the former CEO of Twitter and the co-founder. And according to him, Jack's style of working is not deep. So you may wonder, if deep work is not so important, how do the distracted people like Jack Dorsey do well? Because the necessity of distraction in the lives of these executives is highly specific to their particular jobs. So this is an important message that the author is giving. And he also says, if you ask a CEO to spend 4 hours to think deeply about a particular problem, he says that's a waste of time. because it's smarter to hire 3 subordinates who can think deeply about the problem and then share their thoughts with the CEO hooked for the final decision. The next chapter, he says, deep work is rare. It's not something that's common. Because big businesses today, they actively decrease the people's ability to perform deep work. And gives the example of the open office culture. And according to the author, this is something that's very distracting. And he gives in a very important question. He says, what's the impact? What's the impact of our current email habits on the bottom line, right? So we spend so much of time on emails, and how exactly is it impacting our bottom line? That's something for us to think about, because he says, does it really help in your work to be constantly connected? He gives a nice principle, the principle of least resistance. He says in a business setting, without clear feedback on the impact of various behaviors on the bottom line, we will tend to work towards behaviors that are easiest at the moment. Oh, this is something easy, I might as well do it now, right? And this is something that deeply resonates with me because it talks about impact, right? Impact, especially on the bottom line. And we always tend to take the easier path. So an important thing he says is, clarity about what matters provides clarity about what does not. He also talks about, everybody these days say, oh, I'm so busy, right? Something common that we all say. He says, busyness as a proxy for productivity. In the absence of clear indicators of what it means to drive and value in their jobs, many knowledge workers, they turn back towards the industrial indicator of being productive. And therefore, they do a lot of stuff in a visible manner. For instance, people sitting back after hours to say, I'm here working, I'm trying to complete my work, right? So that's because you're trying to say, yes, I'm productive even beyond my normal 8 hours or whatever. An important thing that he breaks is, if it's high tech, we tend to think, oh, this is very good because it's high tech. And this culture, he calls it as technopoly. Deep work is a severe disadvantage of technopoly because it builds on values like quality, craftsmanship, and mastery that are considered old-fashioned and non-technological. So he says deep work is hard, whereas shallow work is easy, because in the absence of clear goals for your job, the visible busyness becomes self-preserving, leading to the myth that, all things internet is good because we are in a technological age. The third chapter talks about deep work is meaningful. He says our brains construct our worldview based on what we are paying attention to, right? Who you are, what you think, what you feel, and do what you love is the sum of what you're actually focusing on. The best moments usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to the limit in a voluntary effort to accomplish something that's difficult and worthwhile. Now, this is again something that deeply resonates with me, because last week I happened to be on a trek at Tiger's Nest in Bhutan, and this is exactly what I felt, where I was stretched to my limits, and it was difficult, it was challenging, yet I found it worthwhile. Now, humans are their best when immersed deeply into something challenging. So as human beings, we all like to be challenged, and that is what deep work is about. Now, I would like to take a pause here and slightly digress. Now, if I were to tell you, eating healthy or junk food, which is better, what would you say? Healthy, right? It's a no-brainer, right? So similarly, deep work is a no-brainer. So this is not an argument at all, because this is something, a given, that deep work is something that's essential and important. So now, the chapter 4 of the book is the more interesting part, because till now, the author was actually telling us something that we already know. But by doing so, he's increased our awareness on the importance of deep work. So the chapter 4, he shares with us 4 rules for deep work. So the first rule, he says, work deeply. He says we get distracted with emails, open offices, and incessant meetings. You need your own philosophy to integrate deep work in your professional life. Now, he's given quite a few suggestions, and most of these I quite love. The first one is the way to create. He gives an example of a comic, who gives an advice to an upcoming comic. He says, the work to create better jokes is to write every day. And you ensure that you do not break this chain. So the key message here is consistency. Whatever that you do, consistency is important. Another interesting thing he says is working deeply in chunks of 90 minutes, because he says the human brain cannot go beyond that. Then he says be methodical. Whenever you find some free time, work deeply. He also suggests to build strict rituals around working deeply. So for instance, he says ban the use of internet when you're working deeply. If you're a coffee addict, keep your ingredients for the coffee ready so that whilst you're working, you can sip on your coffee. Another suggestion he gives is making grand gestures. And he gives the example of J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, exactly, yeah. So J.K. Rowling, to complete the final book of Harry Potter, actually stayed in a star hotel so that she could get more mental energy and not get distracted. Similarly, another author by name Shankman, he actually booked a round trip to Tokyo in the business class so that he could complete his book. So he says, a good idea maybe to change your environment. To go deep, you need to think big. And distraction can be a destroyer of the depth of your deep work. Yet another point that he says is execute your deep work like business. Distinguish between the what and how. And he gives the 4DX framework on discipline. The first one being focus on the wildly important goals. Whatever is important, focus on that. The second being act on the measures of success. The third being keep a compelling scoreboard. And the fourth, create a cadence of accountability. An interesting thing he says here is be lazy. Right? That's something quite shocking, right, for deep work, because he says, shut down your consideration for work issues until next morning. What's the big hurry? You might as well do it tomorrow. And the reasons he gives to substantiate this is, he says, downtime aids insight. Now, downtime also helps to recharge the energy needed to work deeply. And the third thing he says is, the work that happens evening in the downtime replaces, that's something not usually important. Now, while on one side I'd like to agree to what he says, the other side of my mind also gives me something else. I don't know how many of you have heard this Doha of Kabir, right? It says, it's in Hindi, it says, Kaal kare so aaj kare so ab, kal mein pralay hoegi, feri karoge kab. Now, to loosely translate, he says, whatever has to be done, do it now, because if you keep postponing it, what if a tsunami or something hits tomorrow and you're unable to complete your work, and therefore do it right away. So this I thought was slightly contradictory. Nonetheless, let's move on to rule 2, which talks about embracing boredom. So he says, don't take breaks from distraction. Instead, take breaks from focus. He says you must rewire your brain to be comfortable resisting distraction. Now, I'm sure if you get a ping on your phone, you're tempted to look at it, right? So he says, resist that distraction. Prioritize and set hard deadlines so that you can work deeply. Another suggestion is to gamify what you're doing, and this is something I have spoken about in my book, Get High, How to Coach Yourself for High Performance, because when you gamify it, you're more interested, you look at it as a game, and then you want to score more points and win. Then he says, practice urges for distraction so that you're able to resist. And he gives 2 suggestions to meditate proactively. He says, 1 is be wary of the distractions, and 2 is structure your deep thinking. The rule 3 is again something different. He says, quit social media. Now, to master the art of deep work, you must take control of your time and attention, and because there are so many diversions that tend to steal them. Because social media is meant to be addictive. So he says, set your personal and professional goals, identify the key activities that support this, and he's given a format that's something similar to OKR, which is your objectives and key results. He also says, consider the network tools that you're using currently, any of the social media platforms. In fact, he's spoken about a lot about Facebook and few others. Of course, he's not touched upon WhatsApp, but nonetheless, he says, look at all your networking tools, evaluate whether it offers you enough benefits to offset your time and attention. Also, when he's speaking about social media, he's not mentioned about LinkedIn, so I think he considers that to be a lot more professional platform. Then the old wine in new bottle, he talks about the Pareto's principle of 80-20, whereas he's conveniently renamed it as the law of vital few, which is nothing but your 80-20 principle. Then the rule 4 is drain the shallow. He says for most businesses, if you eliminate the significant amount of shallowness, their bottom line, guess what? It's likely to remain unaffected. And this is something that I really love that he's mentioned. Because by eliminating the shallow work and by replacing the recovered time with something more deep and meaningful can be a great alternative. Deep work is exhausting because it pushes you to the limits of your abilities. And once you've hit your deep work limit in a given day, you will experience diminishing rewards if you try to cram more. Now this again made me wonder, what do you think the author would have done if he were preparing for his CA exams? It's on a lighter note, because I know people aspiring to become chartered accountants are putting in large number of hours of work, right? Then the damage of shallow work is often underestimated and its importance is overestimated. Another thing he says is schedule every minute of your day. Of course, this has pros and cons, so we can debate about it. And without a structure, it's easy to allow your time to dissolve into shallow work. And I think this is something that I completely agree, because if you're not focused, shallow work eats away all your time. For young professionals, he says, ask your boss, what is the shallow work budget? Because this could shock your boss by saying, what percentage of my time should be spent on shallow work? Another thing he says is finish your work by 5:30 in the evening. Because by having a fixed schedule of productivity, it helps you with your deep work. Now again, this is something I was wondering in this current age and time, how relevant and how practical it is. And to conclude, he says, become hard to reach. So he's given 3 tips. He says, one is, make people who want to send you an email to do more work, right? By doing this, I was wondering, wouldn't you cheese people off? Somebody wants to get in touch with you and you're giving them more work to do. The second tip, he says, is do more work when you're sending a reply to any email. So make it a process-centric approach is what he means. And lastly, he says, do not respond to emails. You don't really have to respond to every other email, which is good. But another side of me also wonders, we are not being courteous to somebody who's reached out to you. So again, 2 schools of thoughts out there. So to conclude with my thoughts on the book, while the book talks about something so important and the rules around this, I also felt that the author is saying contradictory things to seek attention. Like, quit social media, do not respond to emails, be lazy, and so on and so forth. So that was something that kind of stood out, because I feel end of the day it's all about striking the right balance in whatever you do. Another thing I felt is the author could have avoided beating around the bush, because there are no 2 ways, like I said, about deep work. I mean, deep work is a given thing, right? But probably if he didn't do that, the book would have been too short. So I guess that's why the author has gone about doing it. I was also surprised that there was no mention about WhatsApp, because I think, WhatsApp takes a considerable amount of time these days, right? With so many groups, so many messages and non-stop pings, and even a lot of work happens on WhatsApp. So although the book was released in January 2016, I was surprised that no mention about WhatsApp is there. And I was also wondering, social media is a tool for personal branding. So does quitting social media, what happens to people who want to brand themselves? And similarly, for the content creators, which is a big profession by itself. So what happens about the social media part? So like I said, my conclusion is learning to strike the right balance between the deep work and the distractions, because we can't really do away with our, with the meetings, social media, or our emails. So therefore, end of the day, be wise with your time, see how you can be productive, add value, and put in your best efforts so that you're able to achieve the kind of deep work that you really want to. So those are my thoughts. So let's now move on to the panelists and see what they would like to share. Raghu, to you, what are your thoughts on the book? I have shared mine. I'd like to hear your perspective.
Thank you, Sangeeta, for having me here and also, getting me to get back to reading books, right? So I've been an avid reader maybe 7-8 years back, and probably averaged 8 to 10 books in a year, and all hard copies, right? At one point of time, I had more than 400 books in my library, which I donated. And then I thought I'll build it up again, and never managed to get there. And which leads to this book in terms of the topic, because it's a very interesting topic, and probably one of the reasons why I never got back to reading books is the fact that there are so many other distractions that have come our way. It was an eye-opener for me when I read this again. The fact is that all of us have different alternatives that we can spend our time on, and I'm happy to see so many of you here and hopefully spending your time usefully rather than probably in front of a TV watching OTT. Social media, we spoke about social media. I'm hoping that there are a lot of people watching us on YouTube.
Yes.
And not scrolling down on YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, right? So everything has its positive and everything has its negative. Finally, it's up to us to make best use of it. So getting back to the book per se, I think the concept of deep work is not something that we don't know. Many of us, when we were growing up, I'm sure our parents have said that when you study, your concentration should be on the studies. Right? So that's how they say. And somewhere we do try to do that. But once we, get onto the jobs, because we've now grown up, because we've got other things, we lose that focus. And it is important for us to get that focus back and make sure that we are productive. One, of course, in the job that we do. But it is not just about the job that we do. I believe that this deep work is going to develop one as an individual and therefore help them in both their professional and personal life. The good thing about this book is this is not an abstract book. It's given you real life experiences, anecdotes, and also told you how to go about doing deep work, right? So my recommendation is that you try and read this book and probably incorporate a couple of actions in your daily routine. Sometimes when I do some board presentation or budget presentation preparation for that, I kind of put the D&D in my team so that no one disturbs me. But that's very few and far between. So now I need to see how I can get that structurally into my routine. Although team will complain that I'm not accessible, but that's the balance that needs to be found out. And I think, all of us can do something similar or that works for each of you. Find the sweet spot for yourself, and depending on the nature of your work, depending on where you are in your career, you need to make sure that it works for you, and I think it will all help your development. Thank you.
Thanks, Raghu, for sharing that. Very important. In fact, what you said about the parents, reminded me of Arjuna, Drona, like hitting the eye of the fish, looking down. Yes, it was a good share. Over to you, Priya. So what is it that you like about the book, and is there something you disliked about the book?
Thank you, Sangeeta, for having me as a speaker here. Hello, everyone. Good evening. You gave a very good summary on the book. I think she covered pretty much all the important points from the book. You don't have to read the book now. She has covered everything.
Thank you.
So for me, basically, when I read the book, I am not practicing deep work on a daily basis. Okay, which is a point I really have taken it for myself.
Awesome.
But I do practice deep work depending on the situation. There might be a project or something that I have to put my full effort. So I will go into, deep state, I call it like that, and completely shut off myself and work on it. So that's how, but I think practicing it is on a daily basis is very important to upskill myself, right? What I want to do next in my life. Okay, I'm at something in my career, or even not even related to career, or it's something else I want to learn. To upskill myself, I really have to, do the deep work I would say on a daily basis. I think it's important that we have to do it. What I really liked about this book is in today's world, I think we have many self-help books that is available. I would say this is one of the top 10 self-help books that people should consider. It's very relevant for today's world. Back in industrial economy, it was very important for people to be physically present at their workplace or for anything. You have to be physically present. But today in knowledge economy, you don't need to be physically present, but mentally being present is very important. Okay, and that is where is missing with all the distractions that are around us. So how we are mentally present, and that really have a big impact to the quality of work that we are producing. So this deep work will help, all the techniques that she has already explained will help to for you to be mentally present, and also will have a big impact on the quality of work that we bring out. So I would say this is a very important book for anyone who want to, upskill on whatever things that you want to do. So I think you also touched upon about how in the earlier days, like when I was reading this book, I was reflecting upon myself and my kids, right? So when I was in school or even in college, when I was doing my master's, I have to write a paper, I have to do a deep work. I mean, there's nothing like I can go off the internet and search. Yes, I can go to the library and search. It'll tell me where is the paper, but I have to physically go there. True. And take the paper, read like 10, 15 papers and then pick out the relevant information. But today's world is not like that. You Google, or now it's even more, ChatGPT will tell you everything. Right? So this is, I feel a bit sad, even though this is all, it's very important to have. For the children, to the younger generation, they should have a fine line somewhere saying, for what I will go to the ChatGPT or internet, and for what I should do it on my own. This is something I hope the kids at some point get to learn in school also. This is again a skill that they have to develop. Otherwise, I think deep work will completely diminish. Yeah.
Very nice. I really loved the two things that you said. One is on the mentally being present. And of course on ChatGPT, that's exactly something I tell my children as well, because for every little thing you can't go to ChatGPT. You need to actually use your brains and then, see what can be done. So that definitely resonates. Raghu, to you. Now, the author says in the book, prove that some decisions are better left to your unconscious mind to untangle. Now, I was curious to know, do you have any experience on this, or, is there something that you'd like to share about this particular thing?
Yeah, before I get to that on ChatGPT, right?
Yes.
You also need to know the kind of questions that you need to ask ChatGPT to get the right answers.
Yes.
So both of us can be on the same topic, ask different questions and get different answers.
True.
So there's some element of,
yes,
I guess, work that needs to be done. But
yes.
Anyway, moving on to this. So for a very long time, I believed on something called as, sleep it over, right? So a lot of times it is colloquially used, let's sleep over it. And I think that's where the unconscious or subconscious mind comes in.
Right.
Where I've had issues at work, especially when we were doing a slightly complex transaction. And I did not have the right solution, and it was a negotiation point with a third party, and who was not entirely friendly. And I did not know how to approach. And, finally, during the meeting, we said, let's sleep over it and come back the next morning. And believe it or not, in the night, we kind of figured out that there was a middle ground. And surprisingly, both of us actually had the same middle ground. So it looked like, sleep it over is really work. I did not connect that to, a subconscious mind. But when I read this book, I realized that sometimes, and it's not always a good thing to sleep over issues, but sometimes it does work. My recommendation, therefore, would be is give the distance between a problem and a solution. A solution will present by itself to your mind. I think that's the way we should look at it.
Yes, that also prompts me to say that probably when your mind or the subconscious mind is in a relaxed state, that's when appears. Now, if you were to take the example of Newton, how did he discover the law of gravity, though, he was so keen and obsessed with it? Only when he was relaxed and sitting under the apple tree, when the apple hit his head, did he think about it. So I guess, this is my thought, and of course I've heard this from Shishi Gurudev Ravi Shankar as well. So I think,
Nothing can beat Archimedes here. He was lying in.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Again, he was in a relaxed state. So you see, I guess that's the key to it. Priya, to you, the author, like I summarized, has given 4 rules. So I'd like to know, is there any particular one of them that's your favorite? And if so, why? Which one and why?
Yes, my favorite is embrace boredom. Okay, out of the 4 rules, of course, all 4 rules are very beautiful. I really like the embrace boredom. The first rule tells that, of course, work deeply. That's the first rule. The second one is embrace boredom, and come to that. The third rule is quit social media. In today's world, quitting social media, I'm not so sure whether you can completely quit because there's a plethora of information available.
Yes.
You should be on some social media platforms. But we should all have some kind of limitations and put self-control mechanisms on how much time we are spending into it.
True.
And the last one, of course, kill the
Shallow work.
Shallow work, right? That is also to some extent possible, but probably we cannot completely come out of shallow work. There are some things everybody has to do. So, but my favorite is embrace boredom. I feel, this is a keystone habit for following the other rules also, because why we are going into social media? Because we are bored. Okay, we don't know how to handle it. We are bored, so we go to social media. We are bored to do deep work. We are bored to do non-trivial work. So I think if we know how to embrace boredom, probably we can tackle the other rules easily. Is what I feel.
Nice. And I think if I were to add on, it's also the FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Because you feel if I'm not on social media, I don't know what's happening, probably, I'm just thinking loud. That's another one reason why.
This is an observation I do often, and I sort of check myself also. Like, let's say you're standing in a line, in a queue or airport.